have you ever been struggling with your confidence? Do you feel like if you'd be confident a little bit more in your life, in your personal life, relationships, or even in a business, it can massively help you? So you are a lucky person because today on this podcast, I have a person who does just that. Her name is Kat Williams. So welcome, Kat.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Kat, can you tell us a little bit more about your background? What is it you do? And so people can get to know you a little bit more. And after we'll take it from there and we'll see where we'll head.
Well, there's a lot of ways I could start with my journey, to be honest. But as you've mentioned, I do specialize in confidence. And really what that means is removing any limiting beliefs that people have about what they're capable of. So if I explain why it matters to me in a nutshell, I'll tell you a quick story. I was only 10 years old and it was a hot summer's day and I was with a group of children and I got on a bike and I actually got on the front of a bike. There was somebody else riding it. There was someone else standing on the back holding onto the rider's shoulders. And I actually put my feet on the front wheel and held on behind me on the handlebars, which is crazy. And in a nutshell, what happened was we ended up having quite a nasty accident that day. Mm-hmm. And so really looking back, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist now, which is actually about going into the subconscious mind and recalling traumas or incidents that then play out in a subconscious way that we're not aware of. Mm-hmm. And what I learned about myself when I reflect on that is I was trying to belong. I was trying to fit in with this group of children. And I did something very reckless to kind of feel good enough. And what I ended up doing was obviously making myself more different because I lost 2 front teeth. I've got a scar here. I don't know if you're, obviously if you're just listening, you can't, but that influenced the rest of my life. And so it led to a fascination of like, what controls our thoughts and behavior? How does our subconscious mind take over and do things that we might think like, where did that come from? And what did I do that for? And then what can be the repercussions of that? So I help people to really understand these triggers, this programming, and reclaim their kind of natural confidence and control to get what they actually want and get out of their own way.
Thank you very much for sharing. We were very deep into that right away.
Yeah, well, I just kind of thought, let's just dive straight into the truth. Let's be candid.
Yeah. That's good. That's amazing. So can you, because if somebody is listening, and obviously because you are in it, so but for someone, it's like you say, like a limiting belief. Like what does it mean, like for a regular person, if it's a limiting belief? What he should imagine about that?
Well, what I want people to know is that a limiting belief is our subconscious mind that believes it's helping. So it's actually called like a protector part. And what it doesn't realize it's limiting us. It thinks it's keeping us safe. Mm-hmm. But what it does is build like an invisible cage. So it's always trying to protect us from these 3 core issues, our subconscious mind, which is like not feeling good enough. Mm-hmm. If we fail and don't feel good enough, it's like, oh, no, that would be awful. Or it's trying to protect us from feeling rejected or different because we're tribal in our DNA and we want to belong. And then the third issue is it's trying to protect us from sort of going for what we want, but not getting it. And again, that kind of, feeling a failure. Mm-hmm. So by a limiting belief, I mean things like it will come up with this protector part of maybe anxiety, maybe an inner critical voice, maybe something like imposter syndrome, no matter what you do, somebody's going to come along and tell you you're failing or you shouldn't be doing it. And it believes that it's helping. But of course, as you'll know, like that's not helping. That's actually getting in our way. Mm-hmm. Self-limiting, and other people call it like self-sabotage. It's kind of like, I know that it's me that's doing this, but why am I doing it?
So how can someone recognize that they have this limiting belief? Let's say they are doing their regular things, they are, building their business, for example, and how to recognize, that there is some limiting belief inside of you? What would you say?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question because that can take time to sort of realize that there's a pattern. Mm-hmm. And it is about that level of self-awareness. So the way I would put that is, if you could be free from something, what would you choose to be free from? Mm-hmm. And that's where people might then go, oh, okay, well, actually, I'd want to, it's sort of what do you want and what do you feel is stopping you from going for that? So it could be fear of public speaking. They might realize, yeah, I've got these opportunities, but I'm saying no, and I keep saying no. Or I could be going for a promotion, but I'm not. I keep sort of, saying no to opportunities that I'd like to say yes to, and let's find out what that is. Or it could be something like procrastination, lack of organisation. You sort of realise I never quite get.
Do you have yourself at the moment any limiting belief, or when you had the limiting belief in the past, what was it and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, we all have limited beliefs, I think. So, of course, I'm working on myself, literally practicing what I preach. I've got a TEDx talk coming up, and even though I've given one before, I definitely have that kind of, oh no, it's going to be embarrassing. I'll stand up there and it'll just rubbish will come out of my mouth. And I think it's great and it'll be awful. Of course I have that. But I know enough to know that's not true, so the fear, 99% of the time, false evidence appearing real. This voice, it isn't true. It's the protective strategy that, thinks it's helping. And to answer the second part, the reason I care so much about what I do, I mean, I've mentioned there that bike accident, but another truth is that I've overcome a fear of public speaking. Because it is the number one fear in Western societies, and that is it's not a fear of public speaking, it's a fear of rejection, which again, we're wired to belong. So if we stand up and stand out, our mind's going, are you crazy? Like you could be, an outcast, and that would feel awful. So my fear of public speaking came from, I was 15, and the school I was in said, who would like to apply to be head boy or head girl? So I went up to my form tutor in my, sort of class, my form class, and I said, I think I'd like to apply for head girl. And my teacher, Mrs. Emmett, said, I don't think they're really looking for, so I don't think you've got the confidence, Catherine, I was called then. I don't think they're looking for, you'd have to give speeches in church at Christmas, you'd have to speak in assembly in front of the whole school. I think they're looking for more someone like Caroline, someone like that, and not you. And so, a teacher that I'd known since I was 11 for 5 years tells you that you don't have what it takes, you believe them because that's a person in authority saying you don't know. So that was a real fear of public speaking. I'm like, oh, I don't have what it takes because she's just told me I don't. So I had to overcome that. And part of the stories that I tell as a speaker now, and one of my favorite things to do actually, is to help people find their voice because I've overcome it. So if I can, they can.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's a great point what you mentioned about the teacher tells you that, like you mentioned, it's authority. So when we believe in someone as an authority, it could be parent, teacher, someone, and it very often goes to the childhood, like this, what you are dealing with people, right? Getting them to the hypnosis state so they can find the trigger. And I think we all experience something similar. Like I have the same with singing. Like they would say, like you don't sing, your sound is not good enough for singing, and it means that I would never pursue it because obviously I believe that what the teacher said because teacher knows more. And so it's really good that you are saying that because obviously whoever listens that, so they can have something similar going on in their head, and it doesn't need to be true at all. They can overcome it. So if somebody would have some limiting belief, let's say they know there is a limiting belief. They've done the exercise. Let's say, I want to live this kind of a life, but I don't because this is stopping me. So they identify it. So what will be the next step? What you could tell them, like what to do with that?
Well, obviously, if they came one-to-one, that would be a one-to-one session, which I understand not everyone listening to this would be able to do. But if I explain the process of it, then I think anyone can gain from it. So the way I would put this is you've identified, whatever the issue is. So that could be a fear of public speaking, imposter syndrome, procrastination, an inner critic might be a common one. This sort of voice that says, you're stupid, you're going to fail, you're not good enough. Maybe use that as an example. What I would say to that is nobody arrives on the planet with whatever this thing is that you want to be free from. So the first thing I would do in a session is actually under hypnosis, we'd go to when the problem wasn't there. And sometimes that's going right back to like picture yourself as a little baby or a first memory as young as possible when you realise, oh yeah, I arrived on the planet completely free, completely 10 out of 10 confident. There's no baby that looks at the world and goes, oh, I haven't got what it takes, I'm not good enough. We all look out and go, here I am. And then coupled with that, what I help people to see, I will have done a strength psychology kind of assessment before the session, or I do this in groups, I get everyone to find their strengths. And this is a British Psychological Society, like accredited test thing. But what it does is only 1 in 4.5 million people have your top 7 strengths in a certain order. And it's Strength Scope, the test I use, but there are many. But again, what that lodges in is this fact that everyone arrives with all that they need within them. We're all equal, but we're all different. Mm-hmm. And so we all have whatever we need within us already. And then once you acknowledge the truth of that, we then go to the kind of part of the session when I will use regression to discover what significant people or events, what's the root cause that then created the protector part. So say that's an inner critic. We would go to the regression of like, when was the first time or most significant time that you felt not good enough, different, rejected, not important, something I don't care about? And then that would have created this inner critic that believes it's then helping you not to get in those situations again. So it's saying, oh, don't be an idiot and do that. Don't expose yourself. Don't go for something because somebody's going to criticize you and it's not worth it. If it keeps happening, it's going to destroy you. Mm-hmm. Is this like making sense? So, and then we would go to the part of the session, and I do talk about this in groups, but I understand that it's a little bit hard to understand on a conscious level, but people feel it in their body. If I asked you now, feel where fear is, or feel when you're criticized and judged, like where does that hit you? You would be able to feel where it was. You'd be like, oh yeah, I can feel it. I can feel fear, I can feel shame, I can feel embarrassment, I can feel where that is. And then under hypnosis, I'd ask people to kind of, what does it look like how big is it? Because once we identify it, we can then kind of give it a voice. And I literally get people to express like, I'm this part of Vincent, for example. I've came into Vincent's life when he was whatever, and you'll be aware of that. My role in his life is to, and then I get them to finish that sentence. And it's always trying to protect. I'm trying to protect Vincent from feeling like he felt when he was 6. Yeah. So I've been doing this for him since I was 6, and I'm going to keep on doing this until something replaces it. And I can say a bit more about that in a minute, but I'm aware that I'm saying a lot. So
no, it's good. Yeah, it's really good. It seems like obviously you can talk a lot about this particular thing and problem with the limiting belief, and more and more I listen to it is if I realize that if there are some people they are having that issue and they don't know how to overcome it and they tried a few things, and I know it. For example, I know from my coaching, I know it helps like when somebody wants to make money in property or business. I know it's a much quicker way. So if there is anybody who is struggling with that confidence, I'm sure I'll put the link to you if somebody wants to speak to you for, half an hour. I don't know what you do for sessions to, just to find out what the problem is, because obviously it's not just that easy to deal with that just over the YouTube, right? So yeah. And also you mentioned that you are going to speak on the TEDx. When is that happening?
That's on the 13th of February. It's being recorded, so it'll be out on YouTube. I don't know, it takes about 8 weeks, I think, after that.
Okay. And is it a specific location here in UK, is it? Or
it's Chester University are running the event. They do it every year, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the topic, what you'll be doing, is it the one what you are sharing here, or is it something different?
A little bit. So for those that can see, I've got a picture here of a stallion, and the TEDx is called Your Mind is a Stallion, Learn to Ride It. And so it's really kind of partly what I've already been saying about the power of the subconscious mind, because I liken it to a stallion because we have 70,000 thoughts a day. 95% of them are subconscious, like in our animal mind. So if we don't sort of ride the stallion of our subconscious mind, it takes over and it rides us. So that's that analogy. And people really understand that, even if they don't know anything about sort of mindset or subconscious mind, they kind of go, oh yeah, they do know what I mean when I say, if you saw a horse that's out of control and then a different rider gets on the same horse, it can be like a completely different animal seconds later. And they're like, yeah, that's true. I said, that's what I do. I will get, you'll ride your own mind and get the most out of it because there's so much untapped potential. This mind of ours is like the most complex structure in the universe, and we don't even really understand yet its full potential. So that's why I liken it to a kind of a stallion. Would you really want to just leave that in the stable, not doing very much? Or do you want to really, find out what's possible in this amazing mind that we don't even really understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. I think it'll be great terminology that when you take something what in your words, for a lot of people it's unknown, and you can compare it to something which they know, like a horse, like stallion, right? So it's definitely, people can relate to that. Like they see the picture, like you mentioned, about like going on that horse and somebody's in control. Yeah, it's amazing. And I know that you mentioned that you had some problems in the past with the confidence, but is there anything else that led you to, overcome this fear of public speaking and start sharing, what you know with others? Is there any other steps what you had to take in the past?
Yeah, again, one of my biggest ones actually led to when I wrote a book, which was about 12 years ago. And so my journey into understanding this, as I've mentioned, my kind of accident as a child, but my first profession actually went into physiotherapy, which is about physical resilience, and overcoming injuries or illness. But what I realized quite quickly is that the mindset of that, you could have people with the same injury. I would have a ward of people with very similar injuries, but how their mind was working would determine how fast they got better, more than what was wrong with their body. But then the truth is, so I'd been a therapist for a few years. My husband's in the British military. So I qualified through a relationship therapy charity called Relate originally, and was interested in relationship therapy because we'd been moving around. And it was supporting the military couples. But then there was a moment, my husband was out on the front line, and I realized that no matter all of my training, what I thought I knew, almost I had the moment personally when I was completely afraid. I knew that any moment of the day or night, basically for the next 7 months, I could be told that he's not coming home, or he's coming home physically or psychologically different. And that was kind of what prompted me to go, how do people deal with this? And I was looking, I don't know if you can see behind me, actually, I think you can, Keep Calm and Carry On poster. That was the inspiration behind the book that sort of it led to, which was me really asking, what's the difference between, I had people around me, some people kind of thriving somehow through this stressful situation, as the world can throw all sorts of things at us, can't it? Whereas other people kind of self-medicating and had literally taken themselves kind of to bed for 7 months and were trying to just zone out and self-medicate. So what that led to was I was trying to answer the question for myself, how can I stay calm and content, is what the book's called, no matter what life throws at you. So it's real life stories of my clients and fellow military partners. And so, yeah, that was a real moment which really sparked even more of an interest in this subject. When you're feeling really, really afraid, and you feel like you've lost yourself, what do you do then?
And would you mind to share with us maybe 1 or 2 things what you describe in that book, so which helped you to stay calm in those situations?
What I realized it was really about is how we feel about ourselves. So in a nutshell, it's this self-esteem. It was this awareness that it was triggering previous feelings of not feeling good enough, or feeling like, like you didn't have what it takes. And so that was what it was really about. So whatever might be facing us in the moment, it's kind of understanding this isn't the first time I felt like this. So that's the first thing I realized. And I found lots of, I love an inspirational quote. So things then sort of came through to me, and I realized something, I think Eleanor Roosevelt says, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And that could be the same as no one and nothing. So then I kind of realized I am in control of this situation in terms of how I choose to view myself and my ability to cope with this. It doesn't get to tell me that I'm not enough. So that was kind of one of the things. And then another quote that came through that as a favorite of mine is, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And that's Shakespeare from Hamlet. So again, I was like, oh yes, one person's worst nightmare is another person's dream come true. So the situation is neutral, but the words and the language you're using to describe it determines how you feel, how you behave, and then reconfirms how you think. So that was this awareness of basically your thoughts determine your feelings, which determine how you behave, which then reconfirm your thoughts. So if you're saying, I'm not good enough and I can't do this, it's going to become self-fulfilling.
It really reminds me, when I hired my first coach, he was saying something similar. He was saying nothing in life has any meaning, only the meaning you give it. And it's really what you mentioned in these 2 quotes is a similar thing, right? And I know that someone was sharing this situation, just an example, that there are 2 people they interviewed, and they asked okay, you are very successful and you are rich and you have a great life and things like that. Why is that you are so good? and they met another person, and he's an alcoholic, he's drunk, and he's homeless, and they ask him the same question, and they both have the same answer, because my father was an alcoholic. So they have two same people. That one takes this to the life like, okay, if he was like that, I'll be like that as well, and the other one, I'll be exactly the opposite. Thank you very much for sharing that, what you mentioned in that book. So obviously if somebody would want to get the book, where they can get the book, so if they can read it, is it on Amazon, or you have some special link where people can go and get it?
Yes, it's on Amazon. Stay calm and content, yeah, no matter what life throws at you, and it's on my website as well.
Okay, amazing. So we can include that as well. And so for now, so obviously you had some issues, you overcome them. You've been in the military wife. You've been working as a, relationship kind of coach or therapist, right? Helping people, and you really helped yourself as well. After you had to overcome the fear of public speaking. So how did you overcome that fear?
Yeah, well, what I realized with that, there was a moment when one of the stories I tell, actually, I had an opportunity to go on a gap year to Africa.
Uh-huh.
And so I took myself down to this interview, which was quite a long way, age 17. But it had kind of been fueled by my parents as well. They'd sort of said, I don't think you'll get it. They'll be from private schools and they'll be more confident. And it's, but go for the interview anyway. And it's a true story. I was waiting at this bus stop for the last bus. I'd had to do trains and all sorts, all the way down, quite a long way back then, in like whatever it was, 90s. And I'd had this presentation that I was going to present, because I knew it was to teach, you see, in Kenya. So they were kind of interviewing us, can we teach a classroom? And I'd wanted to teach music. I'd even researched some of the schools, and they wanted a music teacher because I play the trumpet and the cornet and the flute. So I'd had donated recorders. Anyway, and I happened to show this lady at the bus stop this presentation, but I was quite nervous, and I said, I'm probably not going to do very well. So she said, let me have a look. And it was all about African animals and mountains and everything. And then she sort of said, do you mind if I say something? And I was going, no, sure, whatever. And she said, you've just told me, far more about why this matters to you in the 5 minutes we've stood at the bus stop than this presentation doesn't tell me anything. Like, you've just told me that you've already got recorders donated and you really want to teach music. I told you as well how much I'd loved Africa since I was 10, because I read a book called African Adventure. And she said, and you've said that you don't think you've got the confidence, and yet you're probably the only child that's come as far as you on their own. I bet your parents are right. Everyone else has been driven by their parents, and they were right. Everyone else's parents were in the waiting room. They all had their fancy. So what she said to me was, why don't you just tell them what you've told me at the bus stop? And that's now my story about, we don't tell our stories enough. We kind of, when we get up to public speak, it's sad when you see a kind of, the way I put it, it's like a grayscale version of somebody presenting rather than the whole multicolour version. So as I say in my story, I didn't really know that I had a fear of public speaking as such at 17. But what I did know is I didn't have anything to lose. And so I did what that lady said. I kind of didn't do the presentation about Africa. I told them the truth. And I feel emotional saying it, because I got out there. And so that's my message. Like, if people don't know how much you care, they're not going to care, what you know, really. And so tell them how much you care. And that's what people want to hear.
Would you think that when there are some people doing the public speaking, and when you mentioned about the story, you shared your story, is it some people, like, when they are like, it's okay, but there is not the connection? Do you think it's a lot to do that people, they don't want to be vulnerable in front of others?
I think there is a lot of that, absolutely. But if you're interested in this, and anyone listening, there's a lot of research these days going into how effective stories are, and it can feel vulnerable, yes, and unfamiliar to take that approach. But I think it's becoming more common, because we do know, again, going back generations, the only knowledge we used to have would have been passed through stories. So we're wired to connect with, and again, famous quote from Maya Angelou, I think people forget what you say, they forget what you do, they'll never forget how you make them feel.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to connect on a heart level and to help you feel the emotion, they feel the emotion.
Mm.
And as you're telling your story, they're telling their story in their own mind of when they felt like that. And that means you've got them then. They're kind of, oh, yes, I get it. Now I'm going to listen to the other information that you're there to give. When they know why you care and why you're standing there, then you've got their attention.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. It's, the stories are super powerful. And as we both are, I don't know, how long actually are you the PSA member? Because I'm new to it, like from last year. Just for the whoever didn't listen, PSA is a professional speaking association here in the UK and also worldwide. And we spoke about that a lot, actually, or quite a lot about in the last interview with Chantal Cornelius. So if somebody would like to know more about that, you go and check the last video, so we don't need to repeat everything. But how long are you already a member?
Not very long, actually. I think my first meeting was maybe October or November 2023. Yeah, so very new. But really loving it already.
So we are both new. So how are you finding it, like regarding like the community and what the benefits that it has?
It's really good to be in a room of people energized in the same way, to speak up and to share what they their expertise or their stories. So yeah, I love being in that environment, definitely, to be in that speaking community. I think once you're in that community, I can't see myself ever leaving. So.
And can I ask you, what is it like your vision for the future, like with your business, or when you are helping people to overcome this confidence and limiting beliefs? So what is your, like, do you have any bigger vision, like for the next, I don't know, year, 2, 5, 10, like what is it you would like to do, and where is it you would like to take that business or yourself or the people?
Yeah, it's exciting, isn't it? I see myself being paid to speak internationally, would be great. Mm-hmm. Get on a plane, turn left, and fly across the Atlantic or something like that. Because again, if I'm really honest with you, I know this drive to perform has been there a long time. And so I want to get even better at inspiring, a large audience with the stories, with the energy that I bring. Because I think, certainly, I'm sure you'll agree with me that certain speakers that all of us will have seen, you never forget. There's something about that moment or that image or something they said that really does lodge in. And it matters to me to try to be that person, to make a difference in some way, in that way. So I describe myself as kind of bookends, which maybe doesn't sound the best, but I really care about big audiences, kind of being that inspirational speaker, saying something in just 45 minutes that someone never forgets, and then the other side of that, I will always be the reason I can do that, I believe, is because it's rooted in the one-to-one work that I do, that has been deeply personal over decades now, with hundreds of people, to hear the very, very vulnerable parts of us and to have a deep understanding of how people, what people have dealt with, the traumas that they have held on to and how they've overcome. So I will always do both. And I would never want not to work with individuals and couples, as I've mentioned, in all ages, but I also want to make a difference one to many at the same time as making a difference one to one.
Absolutely. It can impact more people from the stage, that's for sure. That's why we all do it. And do you have that any specific goal, for example, I don't know, that you want to speak in front of that many people in, I don't know, this many years coming, or is there anything like that, like you have like this vision, like, okay, I want to have an audience of that many people, or during the year I want to impact that many people? Is there something like that which is like driving you to, to get those gigs booked and, go and speak?
Honestly, I don't think so. I actually put a post up this week about the difference between goals and intentions. So a goal could be, yes, something quite specific like that. But for me, if I have the intention right, so my intention is basically never to retire. Because and to always just love what I do and to sort of stand in my light, as I put it, and just be me and share as best I can and make a difference as best I can. And if I do that, the goal will take care of itself, because those audiences, I will build towards that. So that's just how I feel about it, that I want to go with that flow, I sense, just love what I do it well, and see where that takes me, because I always want to do this for as long as I can. So it isn't about reaching a particular goal.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that as well. Some people, they set the goals and they know where they are heading. Some people, like you mentioned, they go with the feeling and they know that it's going to be right, and with the right people around yourself, with the right things to do. So you'll get that as well. And also, just a couple of last questions before we wrap it up. Is there anything you do for yourself? Let's say you'll go and you'll speak for those events, but is there anything you need to do to be a better speaker? I don't know, any practice, something would you do, I don't know, daily basis, monthly basis, which if there's somebody watching and is like, yeah, I want to be a speaker, I really like what Kat said, I would like to try it, but I don't know where to start. Is there anything would you do?
I do work on crafting the stories. So I do certainly keep like a story bank of because you're right, I think what you were saying a few questions ago, in a way, what story would you tell, and would there be any point, and what if it doesn't match the message, and maybe you're just being vulnerable for no reason. So I do very much think about that. If there's a story, I'm always thinking, what message is in that story, and why would I tell it? And if I was going to tell it for different audiences, because I speak to very different ages sometimes. So I'll speak in schools to an audience of 16-year-old girls I have in a few weeks. That story will need to be tailored differently, to land differently, and maybe completely different stories. So yeah, I do put quite a lot of effort into, and then refining it, because you don't want to be standing there waffling for 10 minutes about details that are not relevant. It's it needs to be short, relevant, deliver the message, and to have those feels in it. If people aren't feeling something, they're not with you. And that's actually about bringing in acting skills. So what I've done recently is work a bit more on acting skills, because when you relive the story, don't just retell it. You take people into it with you. So I love crafting all of that.
Yeah, amazing. Storytelling is important. You mentioned you have a story bank or story library. Amazing. That's awesome. And so lastly, if, I don't know, there are some people watching and they are on a different part of their life. Some people, they are working, they want to start their own business. Some people, they are already a little bit in it. Some people, they may have some limiting beliefs, take it to the next level. Would there be one or two things, like a tip, what you can share those people, like very important things, like let's say that you'd go back, I don't know, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, and you would see yourself and you'd say like, no, if I would do that, or if I knew this thing back then, that would really, be really helpful in that moment. So is there anything like that you would like to share as a tip?
I think it's not always easy to know ourselves, but I think it sounds maybe a bit not specific enough, but I think for me, it's a bit like you're saying there, it's about trust. It's about, you do know yourself better than anyone else. But if you've not been taught to trust your instincts and trust what matters to you. So what I've learned most, actually recently, only in the last year or so, is about this awareness of that gut feeling. People talk about listen to your gut, but I'm doing that more and more. And I think if all of us went back and went, that was right. How did I know that was right? But I was right, And so I think that's what I would say, and the more you can sit sort of quietly with yourself and trust yourself, the more the path is going to be broad and open, because it's other people dragging you off it that is going to delay you. Whereas there's actually a deep sense of knowing. And one of my favorite things when I work with children or with adults that are going back, under hypnosis, is they go, I knew, I was right. I've known this, but nobody listened to me, or I didn't even listen to myself. And I'm right. And that's when they go, right, none of that anymore. I'm going to go with my gut feeling. So that's what I would say. Trust yourself, listen, and you will know.
Yeah, it's really powerful, and I definitely agree with you on that point, because I've been in this situation a few times, and I'll just give you one example. I had this client, he wanted to join my coaching, and I'm like, yes, sure, we had a call, and the first few calls, it was good, but after he was more and more questioning, I was feeling like it's not the right client, like I felt it, like, it's not gonna work. But the thing is, I didn't listen to my gut feeling, and I signed him up anyway. And I'm like, yeah, I'll make it work. But of course, after 5-6 sessions, he gave up because he wasn't the right person for the what I'm helping people with. But I knew it inside, but because I didn't decide it by my trust, by my gut feeling, I decided with my logic. So, at the end, it ended up the same way. So, yeah, I definitely agree, trust yourself and use the gut feeling in whatever it is, because I have no idea what it is, but sometimes we feel it, yeah? Okay, amazing, Kat. So thank you very much again for being here today, and I really took a lot from that, and I'm sure that my audience will too, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime, and also I'll meet you on one of the Professional Speaking Association networking events, and thank you very much again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.